Want to know how we create our transfers here at WeFix Kids? Then watch this video. Hello there. In today's video, we're going to be giving you a bit of an overview into the various techniques that can be used to print things like name sets and badges and sponsors onto football shirts. This is the third of 3 videos that we've released over the last couple of weeks, where we've taken you through the key considerations for each stage of a football shirt restoration. So the first one was around the heat press and what the different types of heat press are and the things to consider when you're buying a heat press. The second one was around vinyl cutters and the things you need to think about when you're choosing a vinyl cutter. And this week, we're going to be talking about the printing side of things. So by printing, what I mean is the creation of things along the lines of this, which is a vinyl printed Nissan sponsor from a Japanese football shirt. Now, what we'll do is we'll give you a brief overview of a couple of techniques, and then we'll dig a little bit deeper into the journey that we've had through the printing process. So there's a couple of techniques that I'll mention because you may see them talked about, but then they're ones that we haven't necessarily used in WeFix kits. The first one is around DTG, or direct to garment, and that is where you put a shirt straight directly into a printer and it prints an image directly onto the fabric. We don't typically use that for a football shirt because it ideally prints onto natural fibres like cotton, and football shirts being polyester, etc. It wouldn't be an appropriate time to use it, but we thought we'd mention it anyway. The next type is called DTF, or direct to film. And that is where you start with a see-through layer of film and the printer lays the ink down onto the film in the shape of what you need. So there's no cutting process afterwards. It just prints what you need. And then you apply a powder adhesive to the back. You use heat to set the adhesive to the transfer, and then you've got a transfer ready to apply. Now, although it's a fantastic technique and it's one that provides some very high quality results, it's not one that we've used, and therefore I'm not going to talk too much more about it. But if I talk about the journey that we've been on through starting out all the way to where we are now, we started with a technique called sublimation. So sublimation is where you use a special ink that is heat activated, and when it's activated, it effectively becomes part of the material that the ink has been applied to. So we use something called a sawgrass sublimation printer, which is a relatively low barrier to entry or cost to entry, around about £400 to £500. And what that does is it prints onto A4 sheets of whether it's sublimation vinyl or flock. It prints onto it and you get an image with some registration marks around the outside. And those registration marks are used for the cutting. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But once the image has been printed onto the sublimation media, you then need to apply some heat to set the ink into the media so that it doesn't smudge. Now, once that's done, you would then run it through a vinyl cutter, and that comes back now to the vinyl cutters that we talked about. One of the considerations there, if you're using sublimation printing, you need to make sure you have a vinyl cutter that has the laser eye on it that can read the registration marks and therefore be able to cut accurately around the image that is being printed. In our experience of using sublimation technology, it's not been ideal. What I found is that when you applied the heat, sometimes you would get a bit of an uneven application of heat onto the ink, and then that comes back to the bit we were talking about with the heat press, is making sure you have an even distribution of heat across the whole plate. Because we were doing it when we first started out, we found that because the middle of the plate got hotter than the outside of the plate, the image that we were pressing would be darker in the middle than it would be around the outside, and that's not ideal. So that's just one of the reasons why we didn't really like using it. We didn't think it would give the professional enough results that you would need to be able to offer a service out to other people. Now, some of the other things around sublimation, you can sublimate directly onto fabric. So some shirts you'll see where there's a pattern that's, whether it's a number or a pattern that's directly almost in the shirt, in the material, that's probably been sublimated on. And once it's sublimated on, it's pretty much impossible to, well, it is impossible to get off because it becomes part of the fabric. So when we decided to create WeFix kits, we thought, well, sublimation printing is not the one for us. So we looked into what would be the one. And what we found is something called vinyl printing. So the device we use is a Roland BN20 vinyl printer, Versa Studio vinyl printer. And what it does is it uses rolls. So whereas with a sublimation, the Sawgrass sublimation printer was printed onto legal or A4 size sheets, with this vinyl printer, it comes on rolls. So you either have a roll of printable flock or printable vinyl, depending on what you're creating. And what it does, you use the software that comes with it, which incidentally isn't the most intuitive, but once you learn how to use it, it's great. You use the software to create an image and a cut contour around the areas that you want it cut. And it lays the ink down. And then once it's finished printing, it goes back in and cuts it, got over the bits where it's printed, it cuts it straight away. So there's no faffing around with printing it, waiting for it to dry, putting it through a separate cutter. It's a printer cutter in one. And then once it's finished, you slice the bit off that you need, you let it degas, so you put it to one side, leave it for a few hours. Then once it's degassed, you have to go through the process of weeding. And weeding is something that you'll do with any kind of vinyl cutting, and it's where you peel away the waste, if you like, bit that you don't need from whatever it is that you've just cut. So once you've weeded, you end up with something like this. So this is the backing for the vinyl, and this is the result of it being printed on and then cut around each of the letters, and you peel away what you don't need and you're left with this, which is fantastic. But it's actually, if you notice, this is the wrong way around to be able to put it onto a shirt. So to put it onto a shirt, you need to use something called application tape, which is see-through, this see-through stuff here, and you lay the application tape over the top of it. You use a squeegee to push it down, and then you peel the backing off. So this is the backing. You peel that off, and you're left with that, which is a mirror image. The sticky side is facing me. This side isn't sticky, and you press it down onto the shirt. So if I just put that back on here, show you. So what you'll see is these are incredibly high quality images compared to any other printer that we've used. Roland devices have been fantastic, and we highly recommend them. And because of these, we're able to create high quality images that we're comfortable kind of selling or applying to customers' shirts. So that's the kind of overview of the journey that we've had through the kind of printing process since we started. There's loads of different printers out there, so this isn't a recommendation for any given individual printer. You can get inkjet printers that can follow a similar process to this, but really it's not something that we would recommend because we've not used it. What I would say is that if you're serious about creating high quality images, then using something like this Roland Versa Studio would definitely be beneficial. I think that's around about it for the printing process. People had loads, they asked us loads of questions around how we do it and what have you. I'm more than happy to answer any questions. So if you do have questions, please leave them in the comments. If you've liked this video, then please remember to click like and subscribe. And thank you for watching.